And it is a pleasure for me to welcome to this show Dan McLaughlin. Welcome back to the show. He is a senior writer at National Review Online and a fellow at National Review Institute. He was formerly an attorney practicing securities and commercial litigation in New York and a contributing editor of Red State, a columnist at The Federalist and The New Ledger, and a baseball blogger at baseballcrank.com. His most recent release is a very well-informed, well-researched, and important piece that says, "No, Ken Burns, the United States is not an Iroquois nation. The founders didn't model us on these 6 nations, and George Washington didn't tomahawk a Frenchman." First of all, this is all in the context of your admiring most of what you saw in the Ken Burns Revolution Spectacular. But the opening comments of the entire series, which is 12 hours of television, the opening context sounds like this.
In America, a flame has arisen, not to be extinguished. Without consuming, it winds its progress from nation to nation and conquers by a silent operation. Man finds himself changed and discovers that the strength and powers of despotism consist wholly in the fear of resisting it, and that in order to be free, it is sufficient that he wills it. Thomas Paine.
Long before 13 British colonies made themselves into the United States, the 6 nations of the Iroquois Confederacy, Seneca, Cayuga, Onondaga, Tuscarora, Oneida, and Mohawk, had created a union of their own that they called the Haudenosaunee, a democracy that had flourished for centuries.
We heartily recommend union. We are a powerful confederacy, and by your observing the same methods our wise forefathers have taken, you will acquire fresh strength and power. Therefore, whatever befalls you, never fall out one with another.
In the spring of 1754, the celebrated scientist and writer Benjamin Franklin proposed that the British colonies form a similar union.
Okay, Dan McLaughlin, you've listened to these 2 opening statements, the one by Thomas Paine and then the one by an Iroquois leader. That statement was made originally in 1754, long before the Revolution.
Yeah, it's actually 1744, and then they sort of stitched that together with Franklin in 1754, a decade later, being part of a proposal for a plan of union of the colonies, which at that point was not at all, by the way, a proposal for union of the colonies against Britain, right? I mean, this is they're at the start of the process of going to war with Britain against France. So it really falls down at the beginning.
What's so misleading about this? And your article is excellent and very convincing. And by the way, this story about America was based upon, our Constitution was based upon the Iroquois Confederation. Constitution was drafted in 1787. And again, there's no evidence that between 1744, as you're talking about, and 1787, when we wrote our federal Constitution, that people were somehow studying Iroquois documents.
No, and I mean, first of all, those documents were, strings of wampum beads, so they weren't even translated. Nothing about the Iroquois system was translated into English until the 1840s. So, the founders certainly, some of them were, they were aware of the existence of the Iroquois Confederacy and had a vague sense of how it operated, but they did not study it. And, the difference is that they did study in detail and write at extraordinary length about their study of republics, confederacies, democracies of the ancient world, the medieval world in Europe. As well as obviously by the time they got around to writing the federal constitution, they had already written 14 state constitutions, counting Vermont. They had done the Articles of Confederation. So they had a lot of even of their own experiences by that point to study, as well as, deep roots in, in the English system.
Okay, you generally had a positive reaction to most of what you saw on screen from Ken Burns?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I was writing on the first episode, so I haven't, I'm not gonna give a verdict on the rest of it. But the first episode, I mean, stylistically, it's well done, as Burns always is. And a good deal of it was unobjectionable, but I just had these two significant objections. As we've discussed, one of them is this kind of implication that the founders were kind of basing things on the Iroquois system, which the Iroquois system was not really even a democracy, by the way. They didn't have elections. They had kind of hereditary. I mean, it was more of an oligarchical choice among hereditary candidates. So they did have some consultation among elites, but, the general people were not consulted in who ruled them.
Right, and again, and also the allegiance of the various Iroquois nations to the new nation of the United States. The Iroquois were mostly on the British side, weren't they?
Yeah, well, 4 of the 6 nations. I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, they never fall out one with the other. I mean, right in the Revolution itself, 4 of the 6 nations sided with the British, and the other 2 sided with the Patriots. So, their own confederacy didn't even hold together on its foreign policy during the Revolution itself.
So, if you were to sit down with Ken Burns, what would your plea be about the use of this particular misleading quote and credit for being authors of our constitutional system, giving credit where it doesn't belong?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, if I was making this series, I would have left all of that out. I mean, I think the one, certainly you can point out that, you can point out that when you get to the point of the founding of the American system, that, the American system as a whole was novel. But not every element of it was completely novel. There had certainly been experiments before with democracy, with republics, with written constitutions, with confederacies that had a kind of federalist structure. And so it's really, it's the combination of those elements combined with doing it over a continent-sized nation that was such a truly exceptional thing.
The idea of this massive series commemorating the revolution, obviously it's meant to have the same kind of impact that his great achievement with the Civil War on PBS seemed to have. Dan McLaughlin, your column, I think is informative and historically sound and very much worth reading. We have it at our website at michaelmedved.com. Dan McLaughlin, thank you for your clarification and for your background and most of all for your necessary context for this big television event.